Okay, so here's a scenario. You're a business owner and you have a 10-ton package rooftop unit that's at the end of its serviceable life, or you're a homeowner, you got a 3-ton split system heat pump at the end of its serviceable life. We'll say they're 12 years old for sakes of this discussion. The unit's down, it needs repairs. Do you A, repair the unit, B, get a brand new R-410A unit, which you can get right now out of a warehouse, or C, do you repair it in just enough so that it can get you to get one of the new refrigerant units? So that was a lot of stuff there. But what I'm trying to say is, do you fix it or do you flip it? Like, right, you got this R-410A unit. Do you fix it enough to get you to the new unit? Do you change it now? That's going to be the premise of this discussion today. So to help me work through this scenario, I've got a special guest here today. I got Joshua Griffin. Joshua, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you doing?
He seems to be happy. So I feel a little intimidated here because I've got like YouTube HVAC royalty on the show here. Tell people how famous you are. Just let them know how, like Tom Cruise famous, like when you walk through an airport, or.
Oh yeah. The groupies, they want me to sign their butt cheeks. That's how famous.
Oh my
I've
gosh,
gotten.
you're taking this podcast into whole new areas here now. So
I had a email sent to me yesterday, and a lady said, "Hey, you were there's this list that this guy compiled of the most influential HVAC influencers on the internet, and
wow.
you're number 17." And
What?
my first response to my wife, I didn't say this to the lady. I was just like, "Thank you for sending this to me." But I told my wife, I was like, why am I 17? Why am I not number 3?
couldn't be happy with that 17. It gives you something to strive for, right?
That's right.
Well, I'm sure I was like number 450. So one day I'll be up in the teams.
No way.
I'll be able to have that conversation. But
No
hey,
way.
thanks for coming on the show today.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm a big fan of yours, and this is a really cool topic because it's ever evolving. I think that this was if we had this conversation 2 years ago and maybe even a year ago, there was a simple answer. But now, depending on your situation, depending on a lot of variables, there are decisions to be made that you may not have made a year ago,
Correct. Yeah. And it's like, I just got an email the other day from a business owner. Hey, she's very environmentally conscious per her email. I want to get one of the new refrigerant machines, but the contractors are telling me I can't get one right now. And I've talked to 3 of them. I said, well, they're probably right. What do you think? They're making that up? Like, we can't get them right now. So, let's, for those who don't know what's going on in the industry, let's take a step back and maybe we'll just go through some milestones here. So we've got R-410A is the major refrigerant we have in split systems and package units. It's been around for a long time. The shift in the world environment is to go to what's considered low GWP refrigerants. So low global warming refrigerants. Now, when we say GWP, we're talking about the refrigerant molecule itself, not the GWP that might be produced from the unit. So there's a little bit of confusion there, right? It only has to do with the refrigerant in the unit. So the GWP of R-410A is 2,000 something, and then the GWP of the new refrigerants are lower than 700. So that's kind of the shift. And in the HVAC industry, we don't make up the rules. We just kind of respond to the rules. This particular rule is come down from the EPA, okay? Following suit with the worldwide kind of shift towards these environmental movements. And every couple decades, there's another one. Like when I first started, it was the ozone was the big thing. Remember the ozone layer? Remember that big hairspray thing in the 80s? Like there was we're all
going to get fried.
We're all going to get fried. So that was the big shift back then. So we went from CFCs, chlorofluorocarbons, to HCFCs to HFCs. So we slowly transferred to refrigerants that don't have any chlorine in them, because chlorine's what attacks the ozone, yada, yada, yada. So the ozone's made a big comeback. There's not a big hole anymore. So that's good. We need the ozone. It keeps us from getting fried, like you say. But so now it's all about GWP. So what the important milestones are is, as of R-410A, you cannot ship a unit with 410A refrigerant in it unless it's commercial VRF. That's a different thing. That gets an extra year just because of its complexity, I'm assuming. I'm not really sure why, but I think it's just because to change that over, it's very complex. So right now we're kind of in this quandary, right? You kind of got manufacturers are taking the last orders for 410A because manufacturers, this is and you do a lot of stuff on social, Joshua, so you probably heard this, right? This is all a scam from the manufacturers to make money. Right. It's manufacturers can't stand this stuff. It's very well, explain it better than I can. It's a pain to change over these refrigerants as a manufacturer, right?
I think the biggest thing with this, now we can argue whether or not this is a good thing, but the new equipment also has extra hardware and new things that can go wrong, because these, and maybe wrong is not the right word to use, but new things, new hardware such as sensors that are going to sense a refrigerant leak, and then that unit will go into mitigation mode because of in the name of safety. And so these things obviously, at the end of the day, if nothing else, they cost money to design, to engineer, and to produce from a raw material standpoint. And so I think you're right. I think most of the manufacturers, if they were to get a vote in this, they would probably vote for, let's leave this alone, and I got good margins right now, and let's just move a bunch of boxes. They would probably rather not have to invest in, new ways of assembling these things in the factories and all of that, right? They've already built the assembly line. Let's just make money off of it now, I'm sure, is what they would probably vote for. So
100%. And most of the feedback we get, so if you're a manufacturer and you're using 410A, you've got basically two viable options. You got R-32 and 454B. Those are the two replacements. A2L classified refrigerants. We'll talk about that in a minute. But in manufacturers, we rep products that have both, that use both, use both those refrigerants. And as a manufacturer, you have to determine, first, you got to determine which one you're going to go to from 410A. There's many variables they look at. Then you got to design it. You got to engineer it. You got to order out, it's all new compressors. It's not the same, gear in the equipment. There's UL ratings because they're now classified as A2Ls. And then there's more complexity to it. So the point of that whole discussion there was to say, this is kind of, we react as the HVAC industry to this. Now you've got to make a decision. When's the last time you can order 410A equipment? Like, I'm manufacturer A, I'm telling you right now, this month, and it's different for everybody. This month is the last time you could order 410A machines. And the reason that is because they want it, if they've got an inventory of compressors, they want to get rid of that. They want to use up all that equipment so that that parts, so they could start shipping and manufacturing the new refrigerants. So the quandary is, if you're an owner or a homeowner or a business owner, either one, right? And you've got a unit that's old and it needs to be replaced, do you just replace it with the 410A unit, or do you patch it up and wait for the new unit? So what are your thoughts on that?
So again, I think if we were to have this conversation a year ago, and the reason I do it, I'm going back in time, is I think that, again, now there's a little more to the conversation because of these new refrigerants. So again, if we were to go back a year ago, I think it probably the biggest thing that would weigh in your decision is, how much is this repair going to cost? Because if it's not much, let's throw a Band-Aid on it and get a little more life out of her, right? So that was an easy decision to be made. And then depending on what that investment to repair that system was, possibly the condition of the system, those all might have played roles in your decision to replace, repair, etc. But and so I will say this: even when we heard grumblings and knew that this was coming, I would have folks ask me, "Hey, should I wait?" Obviously, if 410 is getting phased down, it's probably going to go up in price as it becomes more scarce. Should I wait? And for the longest time, I told them, look, we've got plenty of years to come. This isn't like R-22 where it's going to get completely phased out and a light switch at some point, which I would argue the R-22 wasn't a very drastic switch either. However, this 410's gonna be around a little bit longer. You know, don't let that be your decision. What plays in your decision making here. However, now I have changed my tune. I've changed my tune for the last 2 or 3 months, and I have finally. I'm now the guy that has been saying, you know, if I was talking to my own mom, I would probably tell her to wait. You know,
you're that guy. You're that guy now.
I'm now that guy. You know, I changed my tune just like, you know, just like a politician would, you know, and I think now, for me personally, anyway, I can't speak for everyone in every situation, but if I could band-aid that system, if that's the word we use, if you want to repair that system, it again, if it's not a large investment, then obviously it's still a no-brainer on that 12-year mark, right? That you were using.
Right.
But let's just say that it is a large investment, that you're going to have to put a couple grand in it to repair it, pay for the refrigerant, pay for the materials and the part, labor, whatever, to put that a part in there to get that system repaired. I don't know. Now might be the time that you might want to wait. You know, let's get a little more life out of her. And instead of buying a 410 system that we already know that refrigerant's being phased down, maybe, just maybe, it's time to finally wait until, you know, until those new refrigerant systems come out.
So you're leaning slightly towards, and it depends, right? It depends on if it's a bad compressor, but you're looking at the coils like, dude, these things are going to last. Like, you're lucky if you get through the summer. You might be spraying the garden hose on them, but we could patch you up to get to the new refrigerant unit. In that scenario, does it make more sense just to say, dude, just put a new 410A in here? You're gonna end up spending half of the value of getting a new unit on this unit. So it's kind of depends, right? It depends on what the state of the unit is. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and because here's the thing, we're not, you know, again, even just 6 months ago, we had some time. We had some time to some time to suffer. But now I know we're in the summer and there's going to be some suffering maybe, but at the same time, we're now on the cusp. Like, I think that some of these manufacturers are saying, at least on the residential side, we're in the home stretch here. Any day now, brand X is going to come out with their first one hitting the market. And then brand Y is a week later. And, you know, distributors are getting their hands on these systems as we speak. Like, you know, I can't speak for all brands, but I know at least a couple brands where you can right now during this conversation at least buy a mini split with R-32 refrigerant in it.
Yeah.
And so we're here. It's the time we finally crossed the ocean and we're seeing land for the first time.
That's right.
And we're there, you know. So
yeah, I'm kind of torn, you know, as a guy who's been selling commercial equipment for a lot of years. I'm torn between getting that tried and true tested 410A unit they've been making for a decade versus this new unit, right? Like serial number 001. We've all been there and sold the new exciting thing and be like, and I know, like, all manufacturers that I know of, whether it's a competitor to what we rep or the stuff we rep, they do a really good job of testing this stuff in the factory, because field problems are very expensive to manufacture and very problematic to everybody involved. But, you know, it's getting that new, you know, just like, I'd like to see it get out there. My advice would be, if you can, is let it get out there, let it get tested, then get one. The problem is there's just no time, because the 410A ones are going away anyway. So you're going to be in a month or two, you might not be able to get a 410A one anymore unless you got some remnant inventory in a warehouse or something like that. My kind of stance is, if you need a unit right now and it's more than 20% of the cost to fix it, just get a 410A unit. Like, that's my stance, because I think you can get a good discount on it right now, and people are ready to move them. But there's so many different variables. I have a 22 unit in the cabin up here, and I just bought a 410A unit. So there you go. So that's kind of how I roll on it. But I didn't want to wait, because I had to put 22 in there last year, and boy, that was not That was not a cheap endeavor to put a couple pounds of refrigerant in there. So, that's kind of, and again, it's like, it just all just depends. So any thoughts on all that rambling I just gave you?
Well, no, I will say that is one thing that keeps getting pointed out to me that I think is something to mention, because and so what I'm talking about is, because of these new the new way of mitigation and the new hardware and all of that, the new equipment is going to cost more. At least that's what we're being told. I cannot verify that. I've not laid hands on one of these systems yet. I think we will in the next couple weeks, is what I'm hoping for, or at least have the ability to order one in the next couple weeks. But I think that that is the only other variable here that might play a big role in your decision making, in that this new equipment is going to cost. I've heard different numbers. I don't want to throw a number out there.
Right. We just don't know yet.
Wise. Yeah, but they are going to cost more. There's more hardware, if nothing else. And if it's a communicating system, then maybe not necessarily hardware from a standpoint of having a control board, but you're still going to have the sensor. You're still going to have the internal programming and all of that. And all of that costs money, unfortunately. Those engineers want to be paid what they designed it. And so that is the other variable here that folks are considering, that it is going to cost more for these new systems. So maybe, just maybe, like you said, save a little money, go ahead and get a 410 system. And maybe might be your decision. That's not the decision I would make, but it's a valid decision. It's a valid point.
100%. Right. So if you watch this show, you're going to leave here with going, well, what do I do? Because everyone's got a different scenario, but you can always contact either of us. We'll be glad to give you our 2 cents. But so what do you think about like just changing solely on forget about all the other factors, but like I'm worried that the refrigerant's going to be very expensive in a year. Now before you answer that, let's talk about, so there's 2 different things going on in the industry. There's the restriction of when you could ship the equipment, and then there's the phase down of the actual production of the refrigerant, R-410A. So right now, as of this year, we're in a 50% reduction from 2022, which was the baseline. So initially it was 10%, then another 40%. So right now, you can still make 410A at a pretty decent capacity for a couple more years, and then it reduces around. So it's not like they're just shutting the spigot off on 410A. Also, I think recycling is going to take a big jump in all this, because there's tons of 410A equipment out there. So what are your thoughts on like solely basing it on the cost of refrigerant going up?
So the refrigerant itself, I think, I can't speak for both refrigerants, but for one of them, it's non-proprietary. You're going to buy it from whoever you get the best price from. And, with R-32 specifically, I think that there will come a time, say 5 years from now, where let's say 410 has jumped dramatically in price, and R-32 is still, because it's non-proprietary, no one holds the patent to it. The folks at Daikin that did hold it, they released it years ago. And because of that, I feel like you should take comfort in knowing that, for years to come, it should be competitive. That's the word I'll use. I don't want to say cheap, but it is. I will say this. If I were to go buy a jug of the 3 refrigerants during this conversation, R-32 is, for me, at least in my market, the least expensive one to buy. And that's now. That's not 5 years from now during the AIM Act. That's now. So
right.
I think that should be something that plays a role in this. There was one other point I was going to make as far as the refrigerants go, but I think that plays a big role in all this.
Yeah. The good thing is, I think there's going to be, just like R-22, you can still get that today. It's crazy expensive, but this is like a decade after the transition, so it should be pretty scarce and pretty expensive. But yeah, I think solely based on the prices, and people forget sometimes you only need it if your unit leaks, right?
Right.
You're not putting, it's not like changing the oil in your car, like you got to go change your refrigerant every couple of months. You're only going to use that if there's a leak. And if you got a unit for 15 years, you're probably going to need to charge it a few times. I mean, that's just the nature of the deal. But yeah, so I don't like this solely on that factor. And from an environmental standpoint too, I kind of like, and I use this example from earlier, it only has an environmental impact if the refrigerant leaks out of the unit, right? And rarely do you get a situation where you lose all the refrigerant. You might need to top off because you lose a little bit over time. But so just don't. I would caution people on, if that's your sole driver, like I want to be more environmentally friendly, I think that's great, no problem. But like, it only infects. It doesn't. Some people think the GWP aspect is the unit uses less energy and it produces less global warming potential, but that's not really the case, right? Because the efficiencies are pretty similar in terms of the 410A versus the new machines, correct? Is that what you're seeing?
Well, I'm glad you said that. So not only are they more efficient, but that is the other point I was going to make, is the new systems will hold, generally, that there's exceptions to every rule, but generally they are also more efficient. So they hold less refrigerant to get the same capacity. That might also play a role in your decision making. If you got this big honking, 5-ton system that holds 15 pounds of 410, 15 pounds of 410 at whatever price multiplier, that can really add up after a while. So let me ask you a question.
Go for it.
If I may. I was asked this yesterday, and I'd just be just throwing this out there to you as a hypothetical. What do you think about someone buying a pallet of 410 and then just storing it as an investment for the next, and then 10 years from now, you double your money or something?
I don't know about that. I guess if you got unlimited warehouse space and it's like, what else could you do with that space? That would be the first question I could ask. I would definitely buy some now if you're doing a lot of service work, which you would probably have some anyway. But, I just got an email from a guy. He's our head of our GM and parts for all of our brands. And the price of 410A has actually gone down a little bit. So like any other investment, you take a big risk. If everybody starts recycling it and it gets flooded with supply, then you're gonna lose money in that. So for me personally, I don't know. I would be like, if you got a business, you probably got some lower hanging fruit, to work on. I would say, how's your website look? That's the first question I would ask, because I'm a marketing guy. Like, how does your website look before you go buy that pallet of refrigerant? Maybe you should invest on that.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. I had a father. So my father-in-law a few years ago. So my father-in-law he's retired, but he was a waterman by trade. So essentially a commercial fisherman. But then down here they call them watermen. And so he would catch oysters in the winter. Sorry to go down a rabbit hole here, but
go for it.
So he would catch oysters. I'm not sure catch is the right word, but he would get oysters in the winter time, and then get soft crabs, keeler crabs, in the summertime. And so he had this this cooler, walk-in cooler type space with these plates, and it had R-12 refrigerant in the refrigerant lines. And so we needed a jug of R-12 one day, and we found a guy that had one, and he was very gracious about it. I don't think he charged us. I mean, he charged us, it wasn't cheap, but I later went online and started looking around and started finding, different websites where guys were charging thousands of dollars for a jug of R-12. I can't imagine if there's any even still out there, what they would charge for it or could charge for it. So
yeah, that's a good eBay maybe, but be careful, right?
Yeah.
That brings up a good point. I've seen quite a few articles on, and I believe this happens normally when there's a transition, on counterfeit refrigerants coming across the border. So, just a heads up out there, don't take that risk. Be super careful, because you could really get in a lot of trouble. I don't know what kind of trouble you can get in, but I'm sure getting in trouble with the EPA with something like that's not good for your business. So just a heads up to be careful about that. If you Google counterfeit refrigerant, I think the ACHR News does a really good job of covering, what to look out for and be careful. So that just kind of jumped into my head when you said that. And the other thing is, like, a couple of things I wanted to talk about while I got you here. You can't, just so there's no confusion, like, the new refrigerants are not drop-in refrigerants for R-410A units, right? Like, there's a lot of, well, can't I just take a R-410A unit and put the new refrigerant in there? No, you cannot. Well, physically, you probably can, but you would void the warranty. You'd be breaking all kinds of laws, codes. The UL rating would go away on the equipment. You'd also void the warranty if there's any. So be super, super careful of that. If you're at a R-410A unit, and I know the new tanks have the reverse threads on the refrigerant tank. So they're reverse threaded for a reason. You have to have an adapter to hook them up to the gauges. And why don't you talk a little bit more about that? You probably know more about that side of it than I do.
Well, I don't know about knowing more about it, but I think I should be learning from you. But the interesting thing about all of that is it's not just because I was always the guy that when they would say, well, you can't put R32 and R-410A system, or you can't put MO99 in an R22 system. Remember that was when all these drop-ins or replacement refrigerants came out, conversations were being had like that. And I was always the guy that would say, well, why can't I? Like, what would happen? What would happen if I didn't completely recover?
You were a troublemaker is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, still am. But what would happen if I didn't recover 100% of the R22 out and I put a different refrigerant in there and blended them, right? What would happen? And so I think at the end of the day, aside from all of that, aside from the fact that you probably could get in some big trouble, these new refrigerants being mildly flammable, what about the safety side of things? If you're going to put, an A2L refrigerant in a A1 system, there's not mitigation equipment in there. If it does leak out in their house, is it as flammable as an A3 refrigerant? No. Will it blow their windows out? No. But it could catch their sleeves on fire. Could, in the right scenario.
Right.
And so I would not want to be that guy. I've actually taught classes on the new refrigerants, and I've had, some guys in those classes, technicians, if you want to call them that, and they're a little too transparent in that they'll say, well, yeah, I'm used to breaking this rule and cutting corners here and there. And what about with these new refrigerants? And my answer is always, I wouldn't want to be that guy. What if something did happen?
Yeah, I see a lot of those comments online too, and I'm like, man, you guys got to be careful. It's not like, when in the 80s, I used to help my dad on service calls, and you'd wash the tools and the refrigerant and stuff like that in your hand. It wasn't even thought of back then, but you get in a lot of trouble today for doing that kind of stuff. So just I echo that caution and the safety. So you brought up the safety factors. Let's talk about the A2L-ness of the refrigerant. So a lot of people don't know. So the A2L comes from ASHRAE 34, which is it designates the safety of refrigerant in terms of flammability and toxicity. So the A means it's non-toxic. The 2L determines the level of flammability. So there's 1, 2L, 2, and then 3 in order of flammability. So an A3 would be like propane, like you mentioned earlier, which is a refrigerant and cooks steak really well. An A1 would be like R-410A. There's an A2, but then, the R32 and R-410B aren't quite an A2, and they're just barely an A1. So they're just a little bit over that. That's why it's A2L, which stands for lower, I believe it's lower flammability. Yeah, I'm looking at my thing here, lower flammability. So, you could look up videos on YouTube, and I don't suggest anybody try this at home, but you can look up videos of YouTube of guys they got a tank and they're they're in a reasonably safe area and they're lighting it to show it's really hard to light, right? Like, it's not like propane, but it is very serious if you violate the UL rating and the codes of the building and put it in the warranty. So it's, we share often about, don't be frightened of the flammability aspect of it, but we do that with caution and say, look, that doesn't take away from the seriousness of the other aspects, the UL and the codes and everything like that, right?
Yeah, I've heard it said a few times that these new A2L refrigerants are probably closer to an A1 than they are an A2. And so one of the things I talk about in my class is, these homeowners, they're already driving wrecking machines with, possibly an A2L refrigerant in the air conditioning. They all have an A3 fluid in the gas tank. They have in their own homes, gas lines going to an open flame in the furnace. And that's aside from all the other possible appliances. I think at the end of the day, do we need to be serious about these new refrigerants and making sure that we're doing proper things to be safe? Yes. But do we need to be fearful? Another thing I do in my class is I'll say, anyone in here born in another country? And I had one class where 6 different people in there were born in a different country.
Wow.
one from Poland, one from Mexico, one from somewhere in Africa. It was just a whole hodgepodge of different folks in there. And so I'll kind of jokingly say to them, well, no offense. And you always know someone's about to say something offensive if they say no offense.
I have to be honest with you. That's another one.
Yeah, I have to be honest. Yeah.
Oh, thanks.
So, but no offense. If Europe and Asia have had these, refrigerants for decades, I think we'll be okay. I think, homeowners should take comfort in knowing, is this new to our country? Yes, but we're late to the party here. Other countries have had them for years, and there's no reason to be fearful at the end of the day. So I do think we should be serious, but I love some of those YouTube videos that I've seen. In fact, I had a guy call me just a couple of days ago, and he said, hey, I was wondering if you'd be willing to come in and teach that class to some firemen and, people in the emergency side of sector of our area. And we've gotten the proper approvals from whoever, and we're going to try to ignite this stuff in front of everyone. And would you be willing to come in and do the classroom side of things? And I said, only on one condition. And he said, yes. I said, I want to bring my camera. I want to be there with the camera, right, to record all of this. And as long as that's okay, then yes, I'll come do the classroom side. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, that'll be great content. You'll have to share it with me. I'll be glad to share it with all of our viewers as well. So yeah, so I can't pass up this opportunity since we're talking about A2L, and just going to show this slide here. By the way, credit to some of these images to both of these images to Homeowners, who's the manufacturer of 454B, who's good friends of ours. And so the way they test the flammability, the flame spread, the flammability, is they put it in this beaker, which is on the right here, and they bottle it up, they mix it up, and then they give it a charge and they ignite it. And the length of the flame spread determines where it falls on the classification of an A1 or an A2L. So this is an A1. So you can see 410A is right butting against the edge of the yellow line there, that 90-degree angle. So where would you think like an A2L would be? Like, I'm thinking flammable. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, it's going to cover the whole screen, right? But in reality, it is right there. So it's just barely over the A1. So, when you think about it in those terms, okay, it is a different classification. It does have a larger flame spread, but really the reality of it is these refrigerants they take a lot of energy to light. It's not like you can light propane with a spark, like a static electric charge. Very easy to light. These are not. When they do combust, their flame spread is very slow, and they don't, hang around for a long time. So that's kind of, and you need a higher concentration of them too. There's concentration limits and stuff like that. So just wanted to take that opportunity to throw that in there because, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I just wanted to point out too, is 410 did light. It did.
Good point.
It is technically, I don't know if it fits the parameters to be called flammable, but it is ignitable. It's the word that we'll say. And, I think most of your audience, they're a little, you've got professionals and different folks that follow your content. So most of them already know this, but just throwing this out there, and that is 410 has R32 in it. It's made up of half R32. So again, at the end of the day, if we're talking to a homeowner or a customer, they don't need to be fearful of this stuff. They've already got it. 410 already has R32 flowing through those refrigerant lines. It's going to be okay.
Two very good points. So I love what you said about, being safe, but being cautious, but not fearful. That was great. I love that. I'm going to have to borrow that. That's a really good one. And then, you've already got these A2, you've got A2Ls if you got a car, like you said, over the last couple of years, your air conditioner has an A2L refrigerant, right? And then the gas is, of course, very flammable. So we've got all these things. So I like, and the other thing you brought up, which I don't do a good job of saying, is these been around for a while. Like, these are nothing new. They're new to us because we're way behind the curve in terms of the movement globally. I mean, in Europe, they're already on to the next thing. Like, they're already looking at the next deal, which I don't know. I need a break. Like, this was hard enough trying to learn all this stuff. Like, and I tell you, man, it is so confusing. It's getting a little better about the information out there, but a year and a half ago, I started I had to figure out what's going on. What is an A2L? What's going on with all these? And it's so, when you Google it online, it's so confusing. So, what advice do you give? Because I know you work with a lot of homeowners, Joshua. What advice do you give to someone who's looking to change their system? They're confused. They're looking to find a good, reputable person in their area. Besides calling you where you live, what do you recommend they do?
Well, they can't call me anymore. I sold my company. That's a loaded question. So it's actually the whole, not to throw a plug in there, but it's the whole reason I created my website. So my website's called New HVAC Guide, and it's essentially a guide. It's as if I were to have written a book to tell a homeowner, here's the pitfalls to avoid, here's the steps you should take. And so I think at the end of the day, I think that I feel like probably half of all the problems that homeowners face when it comes to purchasing a heating and air system or even repairing a heating and air system would all be alleviated if they were to choose a good contractor. Now, I think that's a loaded topic in that it's easy to say, oh, well, just find a good contractor. And then, of course, you make a few phone calls and they all say that they're good, if not the best, right? I've never met a heating and air guy that said, I'm not the best in my area. Like, they all think they are the best.
You don't want to work with me, but here's my quote.
Yeah. And so it's just like every home builder thinks that they are the best. But then as soon as I start asking them questions like, are we going to do a proper load calculation? Are we going to do proper duct sizing? I need enough space for that properly sized duct to be installed. Oh, you're holding me up, or your price is too high to do things correctly. So they all say they're the best. So I think having a good way of being able to compare apples to apples on those contractors, don't be afraid to ask a few questions. I do think there is something to be said for, and I'm just being real now, as someone that did own a heating and air business, a lot of contractors, if you are being a pain in the butt customer, they either don't want you as a customer or they will charge you higher pricing. I mean, I'm just being real now. If we're being real, they will charge you the pain in the butt fee. And so because of that, I think that there's a way for you to interact with that contractor, but also decide if they are good or not. And so one of those being, see how they're treating you from the get-go. If you call them, and it's okay if they don't answer, right? Maybe they're a one-man show and they don't have someone answering their phone yet. There's nothing wrong with that. But did he call you back in a few hours, right? Because if those first interactions aren't good, then how do you think it's going to be 2 years from now when you are having a problem and you need someone to, take care of the warranty?
Right.
That he's not going to make much money off of. So be very objective about it. And then the last thing is as you are asking questions and you're trying to decide whether or not this contractor is quote unquote good, is find a way that, so I always tell folks that we help on our guide, I'll tell them your cousin is telling you to ask these questions. So your cousin, I'm everybody's cousin. Tell them your cousin that lives in Virginia is a heating and air pro, and he's telling you to ask these questions. So that
everybody's got that cousin though, right? Like everybody thinks they have that. Right?
True. But at least the contractor doesn't think he's dealing with that pain in the butt customer that he's going to have to charge.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Deflect it onto your cousin John. Right.
Hey, I'm really sorry. I'm sure you're licensed and insured. My cousin said to definitely make sure I get a copy of your COI before I move forward.
Gotcha.
Before I sign this contract, which, oh, by the way, they should have a contract, Yeah. And my cousin is telling me to do these things. So I think that find a good contractor, be objective about it. Read some of the reviews online. I can't tell you how many people I've helped on our guide, and they will have narrowed it down. And they'll say, I finally found the right contractor. I'm not even going with the cheapest bid. I'm going with a little bit higher bid, but the guy he answered he gave me the warm fuzzies. He said all the right things. And then I go to look them up online and find the last 3 reviews left for their company are 1-star reviews. And they're telling these, stories about whatever happened. And anyway, just be objective about it.
Are those Google reviews? Google reviews generally?
I like Google, but I do know that that's a regional thing. There are regions of the country, I've learned helping people on our website, that Yelp holds more weight than other parts of the country. Of course, Better Business Bureau, all these different websites. Just realize, and I hate to pick on Yelp and Better Business Bureau, but there are websites out there where contractors can pay money to be to have a better reputation on those websites.
Interesting.
And so I'm not saying, I'll just leave it at that.
So be careful. Be careful.
I don't want to say anything that's not true and then they want to sue me. But,
I understand.
But I think I'm safe in saying both of those particular organizations both accept money from the contractor. Whereas Google is completely third party. Although they do have this new program in place for the last year or two, they still don't have anything in place where you can pay money and have your reviews be manipulated in any way. You can still go to anyone's profile, click latest review, and read who somebody just last week posted a review. Tony was there, and he had bad gas, and he left the place smelly. So I read that review about you,
Tony. That dang Tony. You never know. And see how they respond to the reviews too. That's the other thing that's important. If you got a couple 1 stars, but they're like, you're right, we really messed that up, we made it right by doing this, this, and this, that to me has a lot of credibility. But so great information. So start at newhvacguide.com. That's right. Did I get that right?
You did. Yeah. And
tell us about your existing YouTube channel and then your new YouTube channel, because I like to bring as much value to the listeners as possible. So
yeah, thank you. So we are moving the live show and anything that revolves around the live show to its own YouTube channel. So the new YouTube channel's still very similar. It's called HVAC Guide live show is what the new channel is going to be called. And so everything is going to get moved over there. Currently, our live show is still being streamed to both channels. In fact, I think I shared this, you graciously having me on your channel. I shared this on both of those, but it's going to do a couple things. The first thing is I do a number of things. One of the things I do is I have a mastermind group where I meet with a couple different groups of pros, and we talk about, some of the things you and I are talking about, but more from a behind the scenes, how to grow a business, how to treat the customer correctly, how to do business right. And it's not even necessarily that I'm some guru like a lot of guys portray. It's more of getting some really smart guys in a room together, guys rubbing elbows with folks fighting the same fight that you are, and they get to, bounce ideas off of one another. So obviously, something like that doesn't really fit in with videos for homeowners,
Right.
And so giving all this stuff that has nothing to do with being a guide to HVAC for homeowners, a new home. So everything's getting moved over there. We're still going to be posting content for homeowners and still trying to give information. It's more about growing and trying to cover more bases. And I'm just really excited about it. Once we get to, I don't know, I don't even have a number attached to it yet, but we're growing on the new channel, adding subscribers every day. Probably once I get a couple hundred subscribers, then we will stop streaming the live show to the old channel, and only focus on content for homeowners on that channel. But yeah, so new home HVAC guide live show, and again, that we're going to be doing content for homeowners, for pros, for having awesome guests like you were on our show not long ago, and just having a really, honestly, the thought process, and since then I've seen some other cool shows come out, but having a place where anyone and everyone can come and watch a show and get information that they're not getting anywhere else. That's the hope and dream. And so we had a gun expert on there talking about how professionals need to make sure they're abiding by laws, but also staying safe, and when they're doing work. We've had all kinds of cool people. We've got Ty Brannaman, who's, I think if there was a Mount Rushmore for trainers in our industry,
he's great.
Probably be on it. He's going to be on our show. I believe it's week after next.
He's great. Yeah, he's a good resource.
Yeah, so I'm excited about that. But yeah, we had Gil Cavey, who has the #1 podcast in the nation for revolving around HVAC. He was on our show. So just having not just a show that's entertaining, but a show where giving somebody like, say, Gil or Ty a chance to say, yeah, I know I normally do this sort of stuff, but let me give you some info on something that I don't normally even get to talk about, sort of deal. And so, you get to hear Tony tell stories about, something really embarrassing. So you got to go back and watch my show. I'm just kidding. But yeah, I'm excited. If you can't tell, it's been a while since I've been super excited about something we're doing, and the live show itself having its own home is I'm pretty excited about.
That's awesome. Well, I think that's a great way to end it. That sounds exciting. I'm gonna have to go check it out. You want to come back in a few months? Tell us how it's going.
If you'll have me,
absolutely. Absolutely. So thank you so much, Joshua, for coming. And thank you all for listening to the Engineers HVAC podcast. Got a big heart coming at you from Joshua. And I'll put up some QR codes here in a minute. You can check out our YouTube channel, which is at HVAC-TV. You can go to YouTube and just type that in. And again, from the folks at Insight Partners here and Hobbs and Associates and all of our family of brands, we greatly appreciate your support and listening to us. And hopefully we're bringing some value. And Joshua, thank you so much again. You did an incredible job. And as always, you brought a lot of value to our listeners. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I'm going to put these QR codes up. Will you hang out with me in the waiting room for a minute?
Yes, sir.
All right, buddy. Thank you.